It started off as just another ordinary day. Well, at least that's what I thought. In reality, I had received both a parking ticket and a jury summons, so in retrospect, it was shaping up to be a pretty miserable one. Still, and neither of those frustrations would hold any significance compared to what I discovered when I got home that evening. My computer was infected. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's rewind a bit and start from the moment I walked through my front door after work. As usual, the first thing I did was check the mail. You can imagine my irritation when I pulled out the jury summons. Hardly the kind of surprise anyone looks forward to. To make matters worse, the rest of my mail consisted of nothing but junk and bills. Just another one of life's little pleasures, I suppose. Wanting a moment to unwind before dealing with any of that, I headed straight to my computer, intending to do absolutely nothing of importance. Just some casual browsing, checking emails, the usual. Sometimes, doing nothing is the best way to recharge. That's when I noticed something was off. My computer was running frustratingly slow, way slower than it had been just the day before. My first instinct was to check the taskbar, assuming maybe my antivirus was running an update or Windows was sneakily downloading new features in the background. You know, the usual suspects. But no such luck. I tried to tolerate the sluggish performance for a bit, hoping to clear my head before diving into yet another annoyance in what had already been a string of them. But patience only lasts so long. My attempt at relaxing at my desk had failed spectacularly, and I had no choice but to investigate. If nothing else, I was determined to enjoy my downtime, no matter what it took. That's when I noticed the real problem. My hard drive was completely full. Not a single byte of free space remained. To put that into perspective, I have a 1 terabyte internal drive, practically empty. I got this computer from a tech-savvy friend who knows way more about these things than I do. But even with my limited knowledge, I understood one thing: a terabyte is a massive amount of storage. And just yesterday, my entire system was barely using 10% of it. Something was definitely off, and my gut told me it had to be some kind of virus or malware. I'd heard of malicious programs that generate useless data, flooding a system with junk files just to slow it down. I never quite understood the point of such a tactic, but my tech-savvy friend once explained that scammers use these viruses to cripple a computer, only to later offer a fix for a fee. Classic scam. Thankfully, no one had contacted me yet trying to sell me a bogus solution, but my suspicions still felt justified. I decided not to waste any more time and ran a full antivirus scan. Sure, a quick scan might have been faster, but if it turned up nothing, I'd just have to do a full one anyway. Might as well go straight to the deep clean and be done with it. All I wanted was to get this resolved so I could finally relax at my PC. With the scan running, I stepped away to watch some TV, though nothing remotely interesting was on. The only thing I really wanted to do was browse the internet without my system acting like it was wading through molasses. A couple of hours later, the familiar scan complete chime rang out from my speakers. I hurried back to check the results. No viruses, no malware. That was not good. If nothing was found, then what was going on? Still, something odd caught my attention. The scan log listed one file that couldn't be examined due to corrupted data values. The program offered 3 options: list, report, and dismiss. Naturally, I clicked list to get more details. The file name, a string of unreadable square box characters, something like, and then, mixed within the gibberish, was a recognizable fragment do an emma. This was definitely not a file I'd ever created or downloaded. I was sure it hadn't been there before. I'd never installed any foreign language packs, yet the name looked like it came from some language I couldn't read. Japanese, Sanskrit, or something else entirely. Even stranger was its file type. Anima, a format I'd never even heard of. But that could wait. What really set off alarm bells was the file's location, buried deep within a subfolder of System 32. And if I knew one thing about computers, it was this. That's exactly where viruses like to hide. I navigated to the folder and located the file. As expected, my computer had no idea what to do with it. It was listed as an unknown file type, with no associated program to open it. Not that I had any intention of opening it just yet. What really caught my attention, though, wasn't just its unfamiliar format, but the fact that it had no file size listed at all. It was just a jumbled mess of unreadable text, if you could even call it that. At first glance, it almost looked like a graphical glitch, but maybe it was composed of some obscure special characters. I'd seen people use ASCII style signature art before, where what looked like gibberish actually formed something intentional. But that wasn't the case here. One of the first things I ever learned about computers is that they don't act on intention. They execute exactly what they're told to do. Meaning, this behavior wasn't accidental. Someone had programmed it to appear this way. I didn't know what this file was, but I knew one thing for sure. I didn't need it cluttering up my system. So naturally, I did what anyone would do after finding a suspicious file. I deleted it. Or at least, I tried to. The moment I hit delete, a Windows message popped up, access denied. At this point, there was no doubt in my mind I was dealing with a virus. I kept trying, attempting every trick I could think of to remove it, but nothing worked. After 4 failed attempts, a second pop-up appeared, layering over the usual "cannot delete" message. This one was different though. It looked like a Windows prompt, but there was no title bar at the top, and instead of the usual error message, there was only a single word, "stop." Below it were 2 options, yes or no. I hesitated for a moment, weighing my choices, but I already knew this virus wasn't going to let me remove it willingly. So, without much thought, I clicked yes. The window vanished as if nothing had happened. I was back in the Explorer window, staring at the same cursed file, still very much intact. At this point, I realized I should have done some research before messing with it at all. Looking back, maybe struggling through the slow browsing speeds would have been the lesser evil. I decided to run a search for the file name, copying and pasting the strange characters into my browser. Nothing came up, not a single result. Undeterred, I tried searching for the anima file type, which I had never heard of before. Surely someone online had encountered it at some point. But no, the internet had absolutely nothing on it. No forum discussions, no troubleshooting guides, not even a passing mention. That's when it hit me. Maybe this was something completely new. A virus so recent that no antivirus software had learned to recognize it yet. Maybe no one else had even encountered it before. Maybe I was its very first victim. The thought made my blood boil. This is just some effing experiment, I muttered, unleashing a storm of profanity that would have earned me at least a dozen slaps from even the most fool-mouthed of nuns. I wanted nothing to do with this. Not now, not ever, but especially not right now. Frustrated beyond belief, I stepped away from my computer, desperate for another way to unwind. It didn't help much. By the next day, I was still irritated, but at least I had calmed down enough to think more clearly. This was my weekend, which meant I had plenty of time to deal with this mess properly. My first move was to call the friend who had originally given me the computer. She confirmed she had never seen anything like that file before and had no idea how it could have ended up on my system. Fortunately, she offered to help me troubleshoot. After I explained everything I had done so far, she agreed with my theory. It had to be some kind of brand new virus, one so obscure that there was no known way to deal with it yet. Unfortunately, while she was knowledgeable about computers, she wasn't skilled enough to dissect and analyze an unknown virus straight out of the digital abyss. That meant her help ended there. With no other options, I decided it was time to experiment. I spent the entire day carefully backing up my important files onto a separate drive, making sure to avoid bringing the virus along for the ride. It was tedious but necessary. The next day, I was ready to take the next step. Now that I had everything backed up, I could finally start dealing with this thing. The file wasn't a standalone executable. If it were, it would have just run on its own when I double-clicked it. Since my computer didn't recognize what program was supposed to open it, I decided to go through my installed applications one by one, trying to find something that could make sense of it. First up, Notepad. I knew that a lot of unknown files could at least be viewed in plain text format, so it was worth a shot. Sure enough, it opened, but what I saw was just another mess of missing character box symbols. At the very least, this told me that the file contained text, though it was clearly in some foreign language I couldn't decipher. Not exactly helpful, but it was something. With no other leads, I kept going down the list of programs, and next up, Windows Photo Viewer. I didn't expect anything to happen. If the file opened in Notepad, that meant it was a text-based file, right? How could Photo Viewer make sense of it? But somehow, against all logic, it worked. An image popped up on my screen, a quiet suburban house. It looked like it could have been anywhere in an American neighborhood, except for the subtle architectural differences in the background buildings and the design of the mailbox. Those small details hinted that this was from another country, though without any visible text, I couldn't pinpoint exactly where. Confused but intrigued, I tried to move the window aside so I could come back to it later, but in my clumsy haste, I accidentally closed it instead. Annoyed, I reopened the file in Photo Viewer. Again, it worked. But this time, the image was different. Instead of the suburban house, I was now looking at the interior of a car, driving down a brick road from the driver's perspective. I froze. This made no sense. Even if, for some bizarre reason, the file was compatible with both Notepad and Photo Viewer, it should still display the same thing every time it opened. A single file doesn't just change its contents at random. If this was a virus, it wasn't just infecting my system, it was playing with it. Determined to see what would happen next, I opened the file once again in Photo Viewer, and this time instead of a photograph, the file displayed a series of large, bold white symbols against a black background. I wasn't entirely sure, but they looked like Russian characters. Was that where this file had come from? Russia. And did that mean the strange text from Notepad was also in Russian? Unfortunately, since this was an image, I couldn't simply copy and paste the text into a search engine for translation. But I was curious. I decided to take a screenshot so I could look into it later. I hit print screen, opened MS Paint, and pasted the image, except it wasn't the same image anymore. Instead of the Russian text, I was now staring at a photograph of a young woman in formal attire, gazing directly at the camera with an expectant expression. What the hell? Every time I opened this file, it showed something different. I quickly tested a theory. Using undo and redo in rapid succession, I watched as the image changed with each refresh. A grocery store, a theater, someone's living room, a man staring into a mirror, a pair of gravesits. Then, on the next refresh, the image changed again. This time, it was just a black screen with white text. OT. I jolted in my seat. Was this message directed at me? Could the Russian text I saw earlier have been the same message, just in another language? If so, was this file programmed to display different warnings depending on who opened it? Maybe someone had preloaded hundreds of images into a slideshow-like sequence, with this chilling message hidden among them. If that were the case, there could be versions of this message in multiple languages. I had just happened to see the Russian one first. Still, something about that big, bold, inescapable text got to me. I quickly shut down Paint. But my curiosity had only grown stronger. I wanted to see what other programs could open this file. Next, I tried Windows Media Player. To my surprise, it actually recognized the file, but as an audio file. Even stranger, while the timestamp was counting upward, the progress bar never moved. It remained stuck at the far left, the way it might if it were playing an online live stream. Then the audio started. It was a clear recording of several people speaking in Russian. and as soon as I heard it, and now I was more certain than ever, the language was definitely Russian. Another clue was the background noise. I could hear the distinct sounds of dishes clanking and liquid being slurped, and the word borscht came up multiple times. From what I could gather, this was likely a recording of a family dinner. Why it was embedded in this mysterious file, I had no idea. For the next 5 minutes, the audio remained completely mundane, just casual conversation over a meal. Nothing particularly interesting happened. So, I closed Windows Media Player and decided to try something else. This time I opened the file in VLC Media Player. Strangely, VLC recognized it as a video. I had no idea why 2 different media players would interpret the same file differently, but just like before, the timestamp kept counting up while the progress bar stayed frozen at the left, due to my computer's sluggish performance. No doubt thanks to the infection, the video playback was incredibly choppy. But from what I could make out, the footage appeared to be a first-person view of someone sitting in an office, working on paperwork. At times, I could see the person's reflection in a computer monitor, and that's when I realized he looked exactly like the man from the earlier image, the one staring into a mirror. Curious to see what would happen, I tried skipping ahead using the seek bar. That's when everything went wrong. The moment I attempted to move the bar even slightly, VLC crashed. I sighed and shut it down, but when I returned to my desktop, a new Windows message had appeared underneath the VLC window. Like before, there was no title bar, just a single line of text, STYOUT, and beneath it the same 2 options as before, a yes and no. This time, just to see what would happen, I clicked no. That may have been a mistake. The message box didn't close. Instead, my computer started whirring loudly, as if it was suddenly under immense strain. The screen nearly froze, and my mouse cursor refused to move beyond the message box. The SNAT window was still on the screen, and both options, yes and no, remained selectable. At this point, I was certain my computer was struggling to process whatever command had just been triggered. I clicked no again. This time the reaction was immediate, and much worse. Countless message windows began flooding my screen, each one identical to the last, STOUT. They kept popping up, one after another, layering endlessly over the previous ones. My computer was now slowing to a crawl, the sheer number of error messages dragging it down to a snail's pace. I tried moving my mouse, but it lagged horribly, creeping across the screen like it was wading through quicksand. At this point, I had one go end this nightmare. Painfully, I inched my cursor away from no and toward the yes button. It took far longer than it should have, but finally I clicked it. Just like that, everything stopped. The endless message windows vanished. The hard drive stopped whirring. My system returned to what passed for normal, or at least, back to how it was before I clicked no. The file was still there. It still needed to be dealt with. Determined, I tried deleting it once more. This time, a new message appeared. ONUTO, the only option. Okay. Strange. This was different from the message I had gotten last time. Trying to close the window manually did nothing. Reluctantly, I clicked OK. The message disappeared, but the file remained. Fine. If I couldn't delete it, maybe I could move it off my system. I grabbed an external drive and attempted to copy the file over. No luck. A Windows error message popped up. This file cannot be moved because it is being accessed by another program. I tried moving it to the desktop instead, just for easier access, but got the same message. That didn't sit right with me. What program was using this file? Curious, I opened Task Manager and switched over to the Processes tab. And there it was, sitting right at the top of the list, eating up nearly 100% of my CPU usage, was a process labeled. So this thing wasn't just clogging my hard drive, it was devouring my RAM as well. How big was this file? Without hesitation, I ended the process. Another titleless Windows message popped up. This one simply read PAC no, the only 2 clickable options, no, no. And once again, there was no way to close the window. I clicked one of the 2, no buttons. The message box closed. Beneath it, the standard Windows prompt appeared, asking if I was sure I wanted to force end the process. Relieved that the virus hadn't overridden this function, I immediately clicked End Process. My hard drive whirred for a brief moment and then, just like that, the process vanished. My CPU usage plummeted back to normal levels, and finally, after everything, my computer was running smoothly again. But the file was still there. I could have deleted it right then and there, but I needed to check, one last time, to see if anyone else had encountered this thing before. Now that my system was running at full speed again, I did another search for the anima file type, still nothing. Then, on a final hunch, I searched for the name of the rogue process that had been hogging my system's resources. All I found was a definition, anima, a Latin word meaning soul. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. That file, it couldn't possibly be, could it? Was the anima file a human soul? No, that was ridiculous, impossible. This had to be some kind of sick joke, a digital hoax meant to mess with people, designed to send them into a spiral of paranoia and fear. Someone had gone to great lengths to program all of this. The pop-up messages, the unsettling images, the choppy video, the cryptic errors, all carefully crafted to create the illusion that this file was something more than just corrupted data, because the alternative, the idea that this was something real, was completely absurd. Even if such a thing were possible, even if there were haunted computers or some secret military experiment to digitize a human soul, how would it have ended up on my PC? That simply didn't make sense. And yet, I had no rational explanation for how this thing had found its way onto my system. The logical part of me knew better than to believe in supernatural nonsense or some elaborate prank. But still, the thought lingered. What if, no matter how unlikely, it really had been a person? What if their life, memories, thoughts, and emotions had somehow been trapped inside that file? And if that were true, what had I just done? By ending the process, had I deleted them? I didn't want to think about it. I refused to think about it. I just needed this file gone, out of my sight, out of my system, out of my mind. But before I erased it forever, curiosity got the better of me. I had to know, one last time. I tried opening the anima file in every program I had previously used. Notepad. Now it read as a completely empty document. Windows photo viewer. Just a black screen. VLC media player. A faint static hum in the background, but no image, no video, nothing. No cryptic messages, no eerie images, no haunting voices. Nothing at all.